Hi, my dearest of family. So here is part three of my tarot card series and how they are connected to astrology. So today we are going to be talking about card three, which is the Empress. And this is one of my favorite card actually out of all of them, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't carry certain type of challenges. Of course, every single card, just like the planets, can carry some and negative energies as well. But from an astrological perspective, she is almost universally associated with the planet Venus. So remember, magician represented the seed, the idea, the high priestess represented the subconscious, the incubation phase. The empress is the physical manifestation. That's the card of harvest. Now, remember, I did make two other videos about these cards. So make sure that you listen to them because it is in a sequence. So they are kind of like built on each other. And that's why I wanted to give you a bit of a summary there that we've got the seeds, then we've got the incubation, and then now it's all about the harvest. So the Empress embodies the archetype of the divine feminine in its most fertile and abundant state. So in astrology, this manifests through several specific Venusian layers, actually, because Venus rules Taurus and the earth is very fertile. So Venus represents fertility. Venus is the ruler of Taurus, which governs the physical senses, the nature, the material stability. So think of a garden in full bloom, so therefore the Empress in a reading might represent tangible growth. Whether there is a literal pregnancy, a creative project coming to fruition, or even certain type of financial comfort or financial help from others. Maybe if you're asking about a business idea and you draw the Empress, that might be a representation that that business idea might have got really strong legs, and eventually it might provide you with physical security. Now, Venus also rules Libra as well, of course, and Libra focuses on harmony, art, the aesthetics of relationships. So you might draw this card when you're designing a beautiful home or fostering a relationship where both parties feel somehow nurtured. So then, in this case, the card suggests that the solution to a conflict isn't logic or force, but rather diplomacy or having to soften the edges of the relationship and the expectations a little bit. So, therefore, the Empress card can talk to you second house matters, which is often about wealth, of course, or success in career, for example, involving aesthetics, luxury goods, nature. And surely it tells you money flows when you value yourself. Of course, it carries a bit of a fourth house energy as well, because you can see on the card as well that the lady is pregnant. So obviously that acts like a mother figure. But also it might be popping up as you having to act of mothering one's own roots as well. It represents the fifth house too, which is about creative birth. So, because this lady is pregnant, it just indicates that she is giving birth to an idea. Yes, it can be literal birth as well, but a birth of a creative master piece. And maybe that's a book, a painting, or even a child. Now, of course, there is shadow side associated with this card as well. So maybe it represents overindulgence, it represents smothering or even laziness as well, expecting the harvest without having, having tended the soil, basically. So, I do believe that the Empress represents manifestation, nurturing, and creating. But it also pops up often when you have to be able to move from the thinking stage into more of a doing and the growing stage as well. So if the magician is the will and the priestess is the intuition, the empress is the result of that because 1 plus 2 equals 3. And when it turns upside down, it might indicate that one is missing there. Either we are not following our intuition, we are not doing the incubation bit, which is the high priestess, or we have got the will missing there. So usually that's the problem with the Empress showing up and things are not necessarily working out. Now you can see that the Empress is actually sitting on a throne in the middle of the forest. So that's interesting because she should be sitting in a palace or a temple. So obviously that's a visual key. It moves her from that abstract beauty into more of a physical manifestation type of energy. Now, what's very interesting is that Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces, and Pisces represents the Garden of Eden. So in the forest, there are no walls. Everything is connected. So therefore, this card is trying to show you that the logic, for example, and the intuition have to be brought together. It's about the unconditional abundance. It is trying to tell you that anything and everything is possible in life when you actually kind of work for it. So in a career reading, this forest throne suggests that you don't need to fight for resources. You are sitting right in the middle of them. You know, the wealth is organic and it grows on its own as well. Now, the forest represents the fourth house, it feels like. It's the roots. But somehow it is still meeting up the second house, which is the values. You know, the throne represents authority, structure, the self. The forest represents the wild, untamed cycle of nature. So imagine a business owner who works from home while raising a family. So obviously she is the ruler, she is sitting on the throne, but her environment is living and breathing. And that's the forest. So it's a working mom archetype who rules through nurturing rather than through always a corporate hierarchy, for example. I think the forest also represents the Taurus as well. You know, unlike the magician who stands at a table, the Empress is integrated into the soil. And also notice her yellow wheat at her feet and the green trees. So she doesn't build the forest, she is part of it. So this is kind of like the transit of Venus through the houses of substance. It's also about timing. You cannot hurry a forest to grow. You must sit and allow the cycles to happen. The throne is a little bit like the Sun or Leo archetype, though. So when we see the Empress sitting in the forest, I think we are looking at Venus in a state of nature. And it's about not separating ourselves from the world. This means that if you're looking for an answer, like a yes or no answer, this card represents that the answer is actually in your immediate environment. It's right at your footstep. And the forest is self-sustaining. It's the representation of like the signature of wealth. And it shows that you have got obvious talents that potentially you might not have thought of. And then you just need to be kind of like capitalizing on that. For example, in a financial situation, and trees take time to grow. So this is about long-term investment. If someone is asking, shall I do short-term investments? And then you get this card, this is simply telling you no. It's a long-term investment card. Somehow, I think the practical takeaway of this card is that you should stop trying to build walls and you should start planting the seeds and then see which tree is going to grow the fastest. You know, now also you can see the coronation tools that she's got. So the coronation tools represents the sun, basically. So obviously so let me walk you through. We have got the crown of 12 stars, basically. This is one of the most significant tools she wears. Uh, the crown featuring 12 stars. So of course that number 12 represents the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 12 houses. So this card therefore represents the queen of time and cycles. While a human queen rules a country, the empress rules the laws of nature. She wears the entire sky on her head, basically. This means she understands that there is a season for everything, planting, waiting, and harvesting. Then she's got the scepter, which is the power of manifestation. In her right hand, she holds a scepter topped with a globe. Well, usually that's representing the Earth, or even Venus as well. So that's a bit of a Jupiterian energy there. Unlike the Emperor's scepter, which is about control and boundaries, her scepter is like a conductor's baton. She uses it to direct growth. So if someone draws this card in a business reading, it suggests a soft power approach. So you don't have to be barking orders. You should lead through inspiration and providing the resources and asking kind of like well-being questions as well. Now she is leaning against her throne or she is sitting, but we have got this heart-shaped shield engraved with the symbol of Venus. So Venus is actually a protective force. That's what it represents. We usually think of Mars as the protector because that's a soldier type of energy, but the Empress suggests that harmony and values are her armor. So her shield isn't for attacking, it's a boundary that says only beauty and peace are allowed in this space. So I would say that the Empress is not a passive mother. She is actually a ruling monarch. Her power comes from her alignment with natural laws and her ability to command resources as well. Even though she is Venusian, her status is very solar because she is the sun of her own world. So she leads her own life. So therefore, it represents someone who has reached the top of her field and can now sit back and let her empire run itself. I think the scepter also represents legal and moral right. Somehow it says that I've got the right to exist as well. In a career reading, this might indicate an official approval of something. Or it is something that you do not only for hobby, but it means that you have got the tools and the title to be a professional, to be a CEO, to be a CEO of your own life as well. Um, she is though missing one coronation tool. She has got the crown, she's got the scepter, she's got the throne, but actually she is missing the orb. And that's traditionally held in the left hand to represent a kind of worldly dominion. So, but her scepter is topped with a globe, but her hands are not full. So, like I said, the orbs represent the world on one shoulder, the weight of the administrative responsibilities, the burden of governing and so forth. So she's kind of missing a bit of a Saturnian type of energy. Well, what does it really mean? It means that Venus doesn't hold or own the world. She just attracts the opportunities. So therefore, this card also represents to me that um, you don't have to be micromanaging every single detail because you are going to get what you need to get. Just need to set the tone and the world organizes itself around you. You don't have to become a dictator of some sort. Like maybe a client of yours is coming up and asking, how do I manage this team? And then you get this card. It says that you need to let go of the need to control the outcome. Your presence is the authority energy, not necessarily your grip. And even if she was holding that orb, that would be heavy and kind of like representation of certain type of static duty. But she's in the forest. So that's the difference pretty much between Venus and Saturn, because Venus is about pleasure and Saturn is about duty. You will see that in the Emperor card, he has no choice, but he has to be in the castle in a way. So this is a queen who hasn't lost her freedom. She's got the status, but refuses the heavy lifting because she knows that it would keep me stuck, kind of like in a stone palace, and she doesn't want to do that. Okay, so that's another thing. Also, she represents fertility. Actually, in some decks, she is pregnant. Oh, and then the other coronation tool that she is missing is pretty much the sword. So she's lacking a weapon. And this is because she is Venus, not Mars. So she doesn't need to defend her kingdom through force. She creates it through fertility. And she is depicted as pregnant. It's an ultimate Venusian signature anyway. So if you think of Taurus, which is ruled by Venus, Moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. So therefore, the Empress is the perfect blend of the Venus and the Moon type of energy. And Venus is about beauty, pleasure, and value, and the Moon is gestation, cycles, and the motherhood. So this card is also about gestational period for any project. So if you draw this card while starting a business, the message is that the seed is planted and it is growing inside the womb of your life. So you cannot rush that 9 month cycle. The baby needs 9 months um, to fully grow, right? So therefore, often this card is going to actually represent 9 unit as well. It really feels like that the Empress card is somehow the intersection of the fourth and the fifth house. So the Empress is the fifth house realized in the physical second house. It is the joy of creation becoming a physical reality that you can eventually touch. So this card wants you to create something tangible, not necessarily too far-fetched. Just as a pregnant woman's body is working hard even when she's sitting still, therefore the Empress shows that waiting is actually a type of working as well. Imagine that you are a writer who have finished a draft, but you haven't published it yet. So the book is still alive. It just needs time to be born and edited and all those type of stuff. And also because she is missing the sword, it means that you cannot fight a pregnancy to go faster. So you must surrender to the timing of the body. And like we said, Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces. In many decks, actually, her gown is covered in pomegranates, which is the symbol of the many seeds, right? So that's also a representation of certain type of expansion as well. But it can be appearing in readings where someone feels stagnant. You just need to be reminded that the Empress looks still because she's carrying so much weight at the same time. So this isn't about being stuck. This is more about a ripening period. It's number three. So number three is quite a magic number in my opinion. It's the first point of synthesis. So if number one is the father, that's the spark, and number two is the mother, which is the container. The number three is the child. So it is the bridge that turns the duality into more of a reality. That's why it's a manifestation card. And when you think of number three, that is the representation of the trine aspect. And the trine show flow, luck, and certain type of natural talents. So this card represents that you don't have to try extremely hard to create something. The forest grows because that it's nature. Uh, Also, it might be uh, and like I said, number three is one and plus two equals number three. So that brings together the intuition and the seeding element as well, like we discussed before. Number three also represents the trinity of time, past, present, and future. Because she is pregnant, she represents the future already existing within the present. So therefore, often it might be appearing in charts where you cannot really change your future anymore because it has already happened. Maybe you draw this card when a client is worried about the future. The number three tells them that the future is already alive inside your current actions. Feed the present so that the future can take care of itself. Um, Now, let's just go back to that pomegranates a little bit because that feels like it's a bit of a Jupiterian type of stuff because On one hand, it's a lot of pomegranates there, right? And Jupiter represents expansion, more than enough. So each pomegranate is a single fruit that contains hundreds of seeds. So this is also somehow showing that dress is suggesting that one small idea can become the seed for dozens of other opportunities as well. So it is somehow telling you to go and open the door. She isn't just wearing a pattern here, she is wearing a portfolio. Every single pomegranate on her dress is a project that she has successfully matured already. But also, some people connect the pomegranates to the underworld, an eighth house type of energy. It is linked to Persephone, who ate the seeds and had to stay in the underworld for part of the year. So it shows that this card needs to understand the secret of life, death, the karmic debts. She knows that for the forest to be green, something had to compost and die to provide the soil. So she isn't just a shallow beauty here. She's the beauty that comes from deep, soulful experiences. It really feels like that gown is like a living map of her fertility. It feels like it's like the Venus-Jupiter aspect, for example, in the chart. Um, also you in some decks you can see corns as well or wheat at her feet. And that obviously the representation of harvest. And that harvest is somehow connected to the sixth house or the Virgo elements as well. Virgo is about the practical results of labor, you know. Um, so let's say if you're asking about a job, the corn suggests that their previous hard work is finally ripe. You are not in a planting stage anymore. You're kind of like getting into that payoff stage. The Empress represents the fixed quality in astrology. So the result that stays with you. Obviously, if you think of the corn, cornbread comes to my mind. So this is about pretty much like from the wheat, like like you are going from the seeds to the bread. And it does take a process, right? It's a little bit of a longer period. But also the wheat is the representation of the end of the cycle. So often this card is going to pop up when there's a grand finale of a project. Like if this card appears in the future position of a spread, it guarantees that the client's effort will result in something tangible that they can feed their kind of family with. So it's really good. Wheat cannot grow without the earth. And it cannot really grow without the sun either. So we need all those. We need the bricks. We need everything we need to be able to get going. So guys, I hope this makes sense. And now we understand the Empress card a lot better. So I will see you in my next video and we're going to be looking at the Emperor. Good luck, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.